Marcus Aurelius wrote his most profound thoughts in a personal journal never meant for public eyes. Yet 2,000 years later, his private reflections have guided millions through life's toughest moments. Today, we're diving deep into 13 transformative Stoic lessons that will revolutionize how you handle life's challenges, starting with why the most powerful people in history kept their struggles completely private. Before we begin, think about the last time you shared a personal problem on social media or with friends. Hold that moment in your mind, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why that instinct might be sabotaging your growth. Number 1. The privacy paradox. Why do we feel this overwhelming urge to broadcast our every struggle to the world? Modern research reveals something fascinating. Sharing our problems activates the same reward pathways in our brain as solving them. When we post about our challenges on social media or vent to friends, we get a temporary dopamine hit that tricks our mind into thinking we've actually addressed the issue. This neurological shortcut is sabotaging our growth. The ancient Stoics understood this phenomenon intuitively. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before becoming one of history's greatest philosophers, never wrote about his personal suffering. Instead, he focused entirely on developing inner strength. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, kept his deepest thoughts private in what we now call meditations. These weren't meant for publication. They were his personal training ground for mental resilience. Consider the difference between two people facing job loss. Person A immediately posts about their termination on LinkedIn, seeking sympathy and advice from their network. They spend hours responding to comments, feeling temporarily validated by the outpouring of support. Person B processes the loss privately, analyzes what went wrong, and channels their energy into skill development and strategic job hunting. 6 months later, Person A is still discussing their unfair treatment, while Person B has landed a better position. This isn't about being antisocial or refusing help when needed. It's about understanding that every moment spent seeking external validation is a moment not spent building internal strength. When you share your struggles prematurely, you're essentially asking others to carry emotional weight that belongs to you. This weakens your capacity to handle future challenges independently. The Stoic approach involves what Seneca called the inner citadel, a mental fortress that remains unshaken regardless of external circumstances. Building this fortress requires privacy, reflection, and the discipline to sit with discomfort without immediately seeking relief through social sharing. Modern psychology validates this approach through research on emotional regulation and resilience building. Think about the most successful people you know personally. How often do they complain publicly about their challenges? Rarely, if ever. They understand that problems shared without solutions become public relations disasters that can damage their reputation and effectiveness. More importantly, they recognize that the act of sharing problems often prevents us from solving them. The practical takeaway is simple but revolutionary. Before sharing any personal struggle, ask yourself 3 questions. First, will sharing this help me solve the problem or just make me feel temporarily better? Second, am I seeking genuine advice from qualified people or just emotional validation? Third, what would happen if I kept this private and focused entirely on solutions? Start implementing this today. Choose one current challenge in your life and commit to handling it privately for the next 30 days. No social media posts, no venting sessions, no seeking sympathy. Channel that energy into action instead. Your future self will thank you. Number 2, internal locus of control. Here's something that will change how you see every challenge. Stoics discovered what modern psychology now calls internal locus of control. The understanding that your responses matter more than your circumstances. This isn't positive thinking or wishful optimism. It's a fundamental shift in how you perceive power and agency in your life. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, observed that even in the most extreme circumstances, humans retain one unshakable freedom, the ability to choose their response. He watched fellow prisoners either deteriorate mentally or maintain their dignity based entirely on this internal choice. Those who survived with their humanity intact understood what Epictetus taught centuries earlier. You are not your circumstances. You are your decisions. Most people operate with an external locus of control, constantly explaining their life situation through factors beyond their influence. They blame their boss, their upbringing, the economy, their health, or their relationships for their current state. While these external factors certainly impact us, focusing on them creates a victim mentality that paralyzes action and breeds resentment. Consider two employees facing the same difficult manager. Employee A spends their energy complaining about the boss's unfairness, discussing it with colleagues, and feeling victimized by the situation. Their performance suffers because they're mentally consumed by what they cannot control. Employee B acknowledges the challenging manager but focuses entirely on their own response, improving their work quality, documenting interactions professionally, developing new skills, and exploring other opportunities. Same situation, completely different outcomes based on where they focused their mental energy. The Stoic practice involves a daily audit of your thoughts and concerns. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself to distinguish between what depends on him and what doesn't. When faced with any challenge, immediately categorize it. Is this something I can influence through my actions, or is this completely outside my control? This simple classification transforms your relationship with stress and anxiety. Research in cognitive behavioral therapy confirms the Stoic approach. People who develop internal locus of control show higher resilience, better problem-solving abilities, and greater life satisfaction. They're less likely to develop depression and anxiety because they're not constantly fighting battles they cannot win. The practical application starts with language modification. Instead of saying, "My boss makes me angry," try, "I choose to feel angry about my boss's behavior." Instead of, "This traffic is ruining my day," consider, "I'm letting this traffic affect my mood." These subtle shifts reveal where your actual power lies. Implement the daily control audit. Each morning, list 3 challenges you're currently facing. For each one, honestly assess whether it falls under your direct influence, partial influence, or no influence. Spend 80% of your mental energy on direct influence items, 15% on partial influence situations where you can affect the outcome, and 5% on acceptance of things beyond your control. The transformation happens gradually but powerfully. As you consistently focus on your sphere of influence, that sphere expands. You become someone who shapes circumstances rather than being shaped by them. This is true power. Number 3, the discipline of desire. Imagine wanting something so desperately that it consumes your thoughts, drives your decisions, and determines your mood daily. Now imagine discovering that this very desire is the source of your suffering, and that true freedom comes from wanting what you already have. This is the Stoic discipline of desire, and it's perhaps the most counterintuitive yet liberating concept you'll encounter. Epictetus taught that we suffer not because we don't get what we want, but because we want what we don't have. This creates an endless cycle of dissatisfaction where achieving one goal only reveals the next thing we lack. Modern consumer culture exploits this tendency, constantly advertising new desires while promising that the next purchase, achievement, or relationship will finally bring contentment. The discipline of desire doesn't mean becoming passionless or abandoning goals. Instead, it means restructuring your relationship with wanting itself. Stoics distinguished between preferred indifference and true goods. Preferred indifference include health, wealth, career success, and relationships, things that are generally beneficial but not essential for your well-being. True goods are wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, virtues that remain within your control, regardless of external circumstances. Consider someone desperately wanting a promotion at work. The undisciplined approach involves anxiety, office politics, compromising values, and tying self-worth to the outcome. Their happiness becomes hostage to factors largely outside their control: company politics, economic conditions, and their managers' decisions. The disciplined approach involves wanting the promotion while recognizing it as a preferred indifferent, not a necessity for fulfillment. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest citizens, practiced this discipline by regularly living as if he were poor. He would spend days eating simple food, wearing basic clothing, and sleeping on hard surfaces. This wasn't masochism, but training, ensuring that his happiness didn't depend on luxury. When he eventually lost his wealth and was forced into exile, he remained mentally unshaken because he had already practiced that scenario. The modern application involves what psychologists call hedonic adaptation, our tendency to return to baseline happiness levels despite positive or negative events. Research consistently shows that people who win the lottery aren't significantly happier long-term than those who don't. This validates the Stoic insight that external acquisitions provide only temporary satisfaction. Practice the discipline through gratitude exercises, but go deeper than surface-level appreciation. Instead of just being grateful for what you have, actively want what you already possess. Look at your current health, relationships, home, and circumstances as if you had specifically chosen them. This mental shift transforms your entire experience of daily life. Implement desire fasting. Choose one thing you currently want intensely and commit to not pursuing it for 30 days. Don't suppress the desire or fight it. Simply observe how it feels to want something without taking action. Notice how the intensity fluctuates, how your mind creates stories about why you need this thing, and how your well-being remains intact despite not getting it. The ultimate goal isn't to eliminate desire, but to hold it lightly. You can pursue goals while being genuinely okay with not achieving them. This creates a paradox where you often perform better because you're not paralyzed by attachment to outcomes. You become truly free. Number 4, emotional regulation through reason. A Fortune 500 CEO once told that learning Stoic emotional regulation saved both his company and his marriage during the 2008 financial crisis. While competitors made panic-driven decisions that destroyed their businesses, he used ancient wisdom to maintain clarity under extreme pressure. This isn't about suppressing emotions or becoming a robot. It's about understanding that your initial emotional reactions are often unreliable guides for decision-making. The Stoic model of emotions is surprisingly sophisticated and aligns with modern neuroscience. They understood that emotions arise from our judgments about events, not from the events themselves. When something happens, we unconsciously evaluate its significance, and this evaluation triggers our emotional response. The revolutionary insight is that we can examine and modify these automatic judgments. Consider road rage as a perfect example. The external event, someone cutting you off in traffic, is neutral. Your emotional response depends entirely on your interpretation. That person disrespected me. They could have caused an accident, or they're probably having an emergency. Same event, completely different emotional outcomes based on your mental narrative. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing reminders to himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He understood that the emperor's greatest responsibility was not managing the empire, but managing his own responses to imperial challenges. His effectiveness as a leader depended on emotional clarity, not emotional intensity. The practical technique involves what modern psychology calls cognitive reframing, but Stoics called examining impressions. When you feel a strong emotional reaction, pause and ask, what story am I telling myself about this situation? Is this story definitely true? What other interpretations are possible? This creates space between stimulus and response where wisdom can operate. Seneca developed an evening reflection practice where he reviewed the day's emotional reactions. He would identify moments when emotions led to poor decisions and reconstruct how reason could have produced better outcomes. This wasn't self-criticism, but training, like an athlete reviewing game footage to improve performance. The key distinction is between feelings and emotions. Feelings are immediate physiological responses that provide information about your environment. Emotions are the stories you tell yourself about those feelings. You can't control your initial feelings, but you have complete control over the emotional narratives you construct. Research in emotional intelligence validates this approach. People who can regulate their emotions show better decision-making, stronger relationships, and greater career success. They're not more or less emotional than others. They're simply more intentional about how they process and express their emotional experiences. Practice the pause technique. When you notice strong emotions arising, take 3 conscious breaths before responding. During those breaths, examine your automatic interpretation of the situation. Ask yourself, how would a wise person view this situation? What response would I be proud of tomorrow? Implement daily emotional auditing. Each evening, identify 3 moments when emotions influenced your behavior. For each moment, consider, did this emotion provide useful information? Did my emotional response help or hinder my goals? What would have happened if I had paused to think before reacting? The goal isn't emotional suppression, but emotional sovereignty, the ability to feel fully while choosing consciously how to respond. Number 5, present moment awareness. Stop living in yesterday's mistakes and tomorrow's anxieties. This simple shift in temporal focus can eliminate 90% of your psychological suffering. The Stoics understood something that modern mindfulness research confirms. Most of our distress comes not from present circumstances, but from mental time travel to past regrets and future fears. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to focus on the present moment, writing, "Confine yourself to the present." This wasn't about ignoring the past or failing to plan for the future. It was about recognizing that all your actual power exists in the current moment. You cannot change what happened yesterday, and you cannot control what will happen tomorrow, but you have complete agency over your present thoughts and actions. Consider how much mental energy you waste on non-present concerns. You replay conversations from last week, imagining what you should have said differently. You worry about potential problems that may never materialize. You regret decisions that cannot be undone. Meanwhile, opportunities for joy, connection, and effective action in the present moment slip by unnoticed because your attention is scattered across time. The Stoic practice of present moment awareness differs from passive mindfulness meditation. It's active engagement with current reality while maintaining perspective about temporal limitations. When Epictetus taught students to focus on the present, he wasn't advocating for thoughtless spontaneity, but for conscious attention to where your influence actually exists. A successful entrepreneur I know credits this practice with saving his startup during a critical period. Instead of becoming paralyzed by past mistakes or future uncertainties, he focused entirely on what actions he could take that day to improve the situation. Each morning he asked, "What can I do right now that will move us forward?" This present-focused approach led to breakthrough solutions that wouldn't have emerged from anxious rumination. The technique involves what Stoics called The discipline of action. Ensuring that your current behavior aligns with your values and goals rather than being driven by past conditioning or future anxieties. When faced with any decision, ask, what does the present situation require of me? What would virtue look like in this specific moment? Modern neuroscience reveals that present moment awareness literally rewires your brain. Regular practice strengthens the prefrontal cortex responsible for executive function while reducing activity in the amygdala that processes threat responses. This creates greater emotional stability and clearer decision-making capacity. Practice temporal auditing throughout the day. Notice when your mind drifts to past or future concerns. Don't judge these mental excursions, but gently redirect attention to present possibilities. What can you see, hear, feel, or do right now that deserves your full attention? Implement the present action protocol. Whenever you feel overwhelmed by large challenges, break them down into the smallest possible next step you can take immediately. Don't think about the entire project. Focus solely on the next 5-minute action. This transforms overwhelming future concerns into manageable present tasks. The profound realization is that you only ever live in the present moment anyway. The past exists only as memory, and the future exists only as imagination. All your happiness, effectiveness, and peace of mind must be found in the eternal now. Master this, and you master life itself. Number 6, death as teacher. What if I told you that thinking about death daily could make you more alive than you've ever been? This isn't morbid obsession, but the Stoic practice of Memento Mori, using death awareness as a tool for clarity, courage, and authentic living. The paradox is profound. Those who regularly contemplate mortality often live with greater purpose and joy than those who avoid the topic entirely. Steve Jobs famously said that remembering he would die was the most important tool he ever encountered for making life's big choices. This echoes Marcus Aurelius, who wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." The emperor understood that death awareness dissolves petty concerns and reveals what truly matters. Most people spend enormous energy avoiding thoughts of mortality, creating elaborate distractions and denial mechanisms. This avoidance creates a strange form of psychological imprisonment, where we become slaves to trivial concerns while ignoring life's deeper possibilities. We worry about social media likes while neglecting meaningful relationships. We stress about career status while avoiding personal growth. Consider how death awareness transforms decision-making. When you truly internalize that your time is finite and unpredictable, certain choices become obvious. That argument with your spouse about dishes suddenly seems absurd. The fear of taking creative risks dissolves when compared to the certainty of eventual death. The urge to accumulate material possessions weakens when you realize you can't take them with you. Seneca practiced what he called premeditatio malorum, mentally rehearsing loss, including his own death. This wasn't pessimism, but preparation. By familiarizing himself with mortality, he reduced the fear that prevents most people from living authentically. He could take bold actions because he had already accepted the ultimate consequence. The practice involves regular reflection on death's certainty and timing uncertainty. You will die. This is guaranteed. You don't know when. This is also guaranteed. These two facts should fundamentally alter how you spend today. Not in a panicked, frantic way, but with clarity about priorities and courage for meaningful action. Modern research on mortality salience confirms ancient Stoic insights. People who regularly contemplate death show greater appreciation for life, stronger relationships, increased generosity, and reduced materialism. They're less likely to engage in petty conflicts and more likely to pursue authentic goals aligned with their values. The technique doesn't require morbid meditation, but simple daily acknowledgement. Each morning, remind yourself, I could die today. Each evening, reflect, I survived another day. How did I use this gift? This creates urgency without anxiety, focus without obsession. Practice the deathbed test for major decisions. Imagine yourself at the end of life, reflecting on the choice you're considering. From that perspective, what would you regret more, taking the risk or playing it safe? What would matter to the dying version of yourself? Implement mortality motivation. When facing difficult but important tasks, remind yourself that avoiding them won't make you immortal. The speech you're afraid to give, the relationship conversation you're postponing, the creative project you're delaying, death makes these delays seem absurd. Remember, you are already dying from the moment of birth. The question isn't whether you'll die, but whether you'll truly live before you do. Number 7, virtue over pleasure. Here's the paradox that breaks most people's understanding of happiness. The direct pursuit of pleasure leads to misery, while the pursuit of virtue leads to deep, lasting satisfaction. This isn't religious moralizing or puritanical rejection of enjoyment. It's a practical insight about how human psychology actually works, validated by decades of research on well-being and life satisfaction. The Stoics identified 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. They argued that these virtues are the only true goods because they remain entirely within your control and cannot be taken away by external circumstances. Pleasure, by contrast, depends on factors outside your influence and inevitably leads to dependency, tolerance, and suffering when withdrawn. Consider the modern epidemic of anxiety and depression despite unprecedented access to pleasurable experiences. We have more entertainment, food variety, travel opportunities, and sensory pleasures than any generation in history, yet mental health continues to decline. The Stoic analysis suggests this is not coincidental. The relentless pursuit of pleasure creates a hedonic treadmill where each experience provides diminishing returns while requiring ever greater stimulation. Marcus Aurelius, who had access to every pleasure imaginable as Roman emperor, wrote extensively about the emptiness of luxury and sensual indulgence. He observed that the most satisfying moments came from acting with integrity, making just decisions, and maintaining discipline in difficult circumstances. His happiness derived from character development, not circumstantial advantages. The virtue over pleasure principle doesn't mean rejecting all enjoyable experiences, but reordering priorities. When faced with choices, ask, which option develops my character and serves something larger than myself? Often, this aligns with pleasure anyway. Virtuous actions typically produce better long-term outcomes and deeper satisfaction than purely hedonistic choices. A successful friend of mine exemplifies this principle in business. When offered opportunities to make quick profits through questionable means, he consistently chooses ethical approaches even when they're more difficult or less immediately profitable. Over time, this virtue-first approach has built an impeccable reputation that generates more sustainable success than any shortcuts could have provided. Research in positive psychology confirms the Stoic insight. Studies consistently show that people who prioritize meaning and character development over pleasure-seeking report higher life satisfaction, better relationships, and greater resilience during challenges. The pursuit of virtue creates what psychologists call eudaimonic well-being, flourishing based on living according to your deepest values. The practical application involves daily virtue practice. Choose one of the 4 cardinal virtues each week and focus on embodying it in specific situations. Wisdom, seeking truth over comfortable illusions. Justice, treating others fairly even when inconvenient. Courage, doing what's right despite fear or social pressure. temperance, maintaining moderation and self-discipline. Implement the virtue filter for decisions. Before making choices, especially difficult ones, ask yourself which option best develops your character. This does not mean choosing the most unpleasant option, but selecting the path that strengthens rather than weakens your integrity and values. Practice pleasure postponement. When you feel strong urges for immediate gratification, pause and consider whether acting on them serves your long-term character development. Often, the discipline required to delay pleasure strengthens your capacity for virtue while making the eventual experience more meaningful. The ultimate insight: virtue is its own reward, while pleasure is merely a temporary sensation. Build your life on the foundation that cannot be shaken. Number 8. Social validation independence. Picture yourself completely immune to others' opinions about your choices, appearance, and lifestyle, not through arrogance or isolation, but through genuine self-possession rooted in internal validation. This is perhaps the most liberating transformation you can experience, and it's exactly what Stoic philosophy teaches through the discipline of social independence. Most people are psychological slaves to social approval, constantly modifying their behavior based on real or imagined judgment from others. They choose careers to impress parents, buy things to signal status, express opinions they don't believe to fit in, and suppress authentic desires to maintain social harmony. This creates an exhausting life of performance rather than genuine living. Epictetus, having experienced literal slavery, understood that social validation seeking creates a more subtle but equally limiting form of bondage. He taught that when you need others' approval to feel good about yourself, you've given them control over your emotional state. Your happiness becomes hostage to factors entirely outside your influence, other people's moods, opinions, and whims. The Stoic approach to social independence isn't misanthropy or arrogance. It's recognizing that other people's opinions about you are external impressions that belong to them, not objective truths about your worth. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself that people's judgments reflect their own perspectives, biases, and limitations, rather than accurate assessments of reality. Consider how social validation seeking sabotages authentic relationships. When you constantly try to be liked, you prevent others from knowing and connecting with your real self. Paradoxically, people are more drawn to those who demonstrate genuine self-possession than those who desperately seek approval. Authenticity is magnetic in a world full of performance. A mentor once told me that the moment he stopped caring about impressing clients and focused entirely on serving their actual needs, his business transformed. Clients began referring others specifically because of his honest, no-nonsense approach. The very quality he feared would repel people, independence from their approval, became his greatest asset. The practice involves what Stoics called the discipline of assent. Carefully examining your motivations for actions and opinions. Before speaking, posting on social media, or making decisions, ask, am I doing this because I believe it's right, or because I want others to think well of me? This awareness alone begins shifting your orientation from external to internal validation. Research on psychological autonomy confirms Stoic insights. People who operate from internal locus of evaluation show greater life satisfaction, stronger relationships, and better performance in work and creative endeavors. They're less susceptible to peer pressure, more resilient during criticism, and more innovative because they're not constrained by conventional thinking. Implement the approval audit. For 1 week, notice every time you modify your behavior based on others' potential reactions. Don't judge these moments, just observe them. How often do you choose words, clothes, activities, or opinions based on social considerations rather than personal conviction? Practice the social courage exercise. Each day, Do one small action that expresses your authentic preferences despite potential social judgment. This might be wearing something unconventional, expressing an unpopular opinion, or declining an invitation that doesn't align with your values. The freedom that emerges from social validation independence is profound. You become truly yourself, perhaps for the first time in your adult life. Number 9, the dichotomy of control. If you could master just one concept from Stoic philosophy, this would be it. The dichotomy of control is the foundational principle that transforms how you approach every challenge, relationship, and goal in your life. Understanding what you can and cannot control eliminates wasted energy, reduces anxiety, and dramatically increases your effectiveness in areas where you actually have influence. Epictetus divided all things into 2 categories, those entirely within our control and those entirely outside our control. Within our control are our judgments, decisions, desires, and actions. Outside our control are other people's behaviors, natural events, the past, and most external outcomes. The revolutionary insight is that focusing your energy exclusively on what you control while accepting what you cannot control creates both peace and power. Most people live in constant frustration because they're trying to control uncontrollable things while neglecting areas where they have complete authority. They stress about their reputation while neglecting their character. They worry about market conditions while avoiding the skills development that would make them valuable in any market. They try to change their partner's behavior while refusing to examine their own contribution to relationship dynamics. Before we continue exploring how this principle can revolutionize your approach to life's challenges, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these transformative insights. If this content is helping you see your situation differently, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We're diving even deeper into practical philosophy that actually works in the real world. Your future self will thank you for taking action on these concepts. The practical application requires brutal honesty about where your influence actually exists. When facing any problem, immediately categorize every aspect as either "I can control this" or "I cannot control this." Then commit 100% of your mental and emotional energy to the controllable elements while practicing acceptance of everything else. An entrepreneur I know used this principle to save her failing startup. Instead of obsessing over competitor actions, market conditions, and investor moods, all uncontrollable, she focused entirely on product quality, customer service, and team development, areas under her complete influence. Within 6 months, the company had turned around because all her energy went toward effective action rather than anxious rumination. The dichotomy of control also transforms your relationship with outcomes. You can control your preparation for a job interview, but not the hiring decision. You can control your kindness toward your spouse, but not their response. You can control your health habits, but not genetic predispositions. This clarity eliminates the suffering that comes from attachment to results while improving your actual performance because you are focused on process rather than outcomes. Research in cognitive behavioral therapy validates this approach through what's called sphere of influence work. People who clearly distinguish between their areas of control and areas outside their control show dramatic improvements in anxiety, depression, and overall life satisfaction. Practice the control audit daily. List your current sources of stress and categorize each one. Notice how much mental energy you're spending on uncontrollable factors, then consciously redirect that energy toward your actual sphere of influence. This single shift can transform your entire life experience. Number 10, negative visualization. Mentally rehearse losing everything you love, your health, relationships, home career, even your life, not to become pessimistic or anxious. but to cultivate profound gratitude for what you currently have and build resilience for whatever challenges may come. This is premeditatio malorum, one of the most powerful and misunderstood Stoic practices. The human brain is wired for hedonic adaptation, meaning we quickly adjust to positive circumstances and take them for granted. The promotion you desperately wanted becomes routine within weeks. The relationship that once thrilled you becomes familiar and unappreciated. The health you never think about becomes invisible until it's threatened. Negative visualization counteracts this tendency by artificially creating appreciation for present blessings. Seneca practiced this regularly, spending entire days living as if he had lost his wealth. He would eat simple food, wear basic clothing, and sleep on uncomfortable surfaces. This wasn't masochism, but practical training, ensuring that his happiness didn't depend on external circumstances that could disappear without warning. When he was eventually exiled and lost his fortune, he remained psychologically stable because he had already practiced that scenario mentally. The technique involves systematic imagination of loss, but with a specific framework to prevent it from becoming depressing rumination. Choose one aspect of your life you particularly value: your health, a relationship, your home, your abilities. Spend a few minutes imagining it was gone, but focus on two specific elements: how much you appreciate having it now, and how you would cope and potentially thrive without it. A friend dealing with career uncertainty used this practice when facing potential job loss. Instead of anxious avoidance, she regularly visualized being unemployed and mentally rehearsed how she would handle that situation. This preparation reduced her anxiety while helping her identify concrete steps she could take immediately to improve her position. When layoffs eventually came, she was psychologically prepared and had already developed contingency plans. Negative visualization differs from worry or catastrophic thinking because it's purposeful and time-limited. Worry is repetitive, unproductive rumination that increases anxiety without building resilience. Negative visualization is intentional mental training that enhances both gratitude and preparedness. The goal isn't to become pessimistic, but to develop what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragility, the ability to grow stronger from stresses. The practice also reveals how much of your happiness depends on temporary, external factors versus internal resources that cannot be taken away. When you imagine losing your job, you realize your skills and character remain intact. When you imagine health challenges, you recognize that your relationships and values endure. This shifts your sense of security from fragile external circumstances to robust internal qualities. Research on mental contrasting and implementation intentions confirms the effectiveness of this approach. People who regularly visualize potential obstacles while maintaining focus on their goals show better performance and greater resilience when challenges actually arise. Implement weekly negative visualization sessions. Choose one area of your life and spend 10 minutes imagining its loss. Focus equally on appreciating what you currently have and developing confidence in your ability to adapt if circumstances change. Practice gratitude interruption. When you catch yourself taking something for granted, briefly imagine living without it. This immediately restores appreciation while building psychological resilience. The paradox is beautiful. Thinking about loss makes you richer in every way that matters. Number 11. Obstacles as opportunities. What if every setback, failure, and frustration in your life was actually a perfectly designed training program for developing exactly the qualities you need most? This isn't positive thinking or spiritual bypassing. It's the Stoic principle of the obstacle as the way, and it fundamentally transforms how you relate to life's inevitable challenges. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This wasn't philosophical abstraction, but practical wisdom from someone managing plague, war, and political turmoil while leading the Roman Empire. He discovered that obstacles do not prevent progress. They create it by forcing development of capabilities you wouldn't cultivate otherwise. Consider how your greatest growth has actually occurred. Did it happen during easy periods when everything went smoothly, or during challenging times when you were forced to develop new skills, discover inner resources, and transcend previous limitations? Most people's most meaningful personal development stories involve overcoming significant obstacles that initially seemed purely negative. The key insight is that obstacles are not random punishments, but precisely calibrated resistance training for your character and capabilities. Just as physical muscles grow stronger only when working against resistance, psychological and spiritual muscles develop only when challenged by difficulties. The universe isn't trying to defeat you, it's trying to upgrade you. A successful entrepreneur I know exemplifies this principle. When his first startup failed spectacularly, losing investors' money and damaging his reputation, he could have interpreted this as evidence he wasn't meant for business. Instead, he analyzed the failure as valuable education, identifying specific skills he needed to develop. The failure taught him financial discipline, team management, and market validation, lessons he couldn't have learned from success. His next venture succeeded precisely because of capabilities developed through the previous failure. The practice involves reframing every obstacle as a training opportunity rather than a problem to be avoided. When you encounter difficulties, immediately ask, "What is this situation trying to teach me? What qualities is it forcing me to develop? How might this challenge be preparing me for something I can't yet see?" This doesn't mean becoming passive or failing to address real problems. It means approaching challenges with curiosity and growth mindset rather than resistance and victimhood. You still take action to improve your situation, but from a place of empowerment rather than desperation. Research on post-traumatic growth confirms this Stoic insight. People who successfully navigate major challenges often report becoming stronger, more resilient, and more capable than they were before the difficulty. They develop deeper relationships, clearer priorities, and greater confidence in their ability to handle future challenges. The obstacle as opportunity perspective also eliminates the mental energy wasted on resentment and self-pity. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "How is this helping me become who I need to be?" This shift in questioning transforms your relationship with difficulty from victim to student. Practice obstacle reframing. When facing current challenges, write down 3 specific ways this difficulty might be developing valuable qualities or preparing you for future opportunities. Focus on concrete skills, character traits, or insights you're gaining through the experience. Remember, the obstacle isn't in your way, it is your way forward. Number 12, Memento Mori practice. Death awareness isn't morbid obsession, it's the most powerful life enhancement tool you'll ever discover. The Latin phrase Memento Mori means, remember you must die. And incorporating this awareness into daily life creates urgency, clarity, and appreciation that transforms ordinary moments into profound experiences of meaning and connection. Ancient Romans kept skulls on their desks and wore jewelry depicting skeletons, not from fascination with death, but from understanding that mortality awareness enhances life. When you truly internalize that your time is finite and unpredictable, trivial concerns dissolve, while meaningful priorities crystallize with startling clarity. Steve Jobs credited his terminal cancer diagnosis with helping him focus on what truly mattered, stripping away social expectations and conventional thinking to pursue authentic vision. This echoes Marcus Aurelius, who regularly reminded himself that emperors and slaves face the same ultimate fate, making pretense and status games seem absurd. The practice involves daily acknowledgement of mortality without becoming paralyzed by fear or rushing into reckless behavior. Each morning, remind yourself, this could be my last day alive. Each evening, reflect, I survived another day. How did I honor this gift? This creates what psychologists call mortality salience, awareness that motivates authentic living rather than anxiety. Consider how Memento Mori transforms decision-making. The argument with your partner about household chores seems less important when viewed through the lens of limited time together. The fear of starting that creative project dissolves when compared to the certainty of eventual regret for unexpressed potential. The urge to accumulate status symbols weakens when you remember you can't take them with you. A hospice worker once told me that dying patients never regret the risks they took for love, creativity, or authentic expression. They regret the risks they didn't take, the words they didn't say, the dreams they postponed indefinitely. Death awareness helps you make choices your dying self would approve of, rather than choices that merely feel safe in the moment. The practice also creates profound gratitude for ordinary experiences. When you remember that every conversation, meal, sunset, and embrace is part of a finite collection, each moment becomes precious rather than mundane. This isn't about becoming emotionally dramatic, but about recognizing the extraordinary nature of existence itself. Research on mortality salience shows that people who regularly contemplate death demonstrate increased generosity, stronger relationships, reduced materialism, and greater focus on meaningful goals. They're less likely to engage in petty conflicts and more likely to express love and appreciation for important people in their lives. Implement the deathbed test for major decisions. Imagine you're at the end of life, reflecting on the choice before you. What would you regret more from that perspective? Taking the risk or playing it safe? What would matter to someone who has only days left to live? Practice mortality motivation. When procrastinating on important but difficult tasks, remind yourself that avoiding them won't grant immortality. The conversation you're postponing, the skill you're not developing, the relationship you're not nurturing, death makes these delays seem absurd. Create daily death reminders. Set a phone notification that simply says Memento Mori to appear once daily at a random time. When it appears, pause and appreciate whatever you're experiencing in that moment with the awareness that such moments are numbered. Number 13. The view from above. Zoom out and see your current problems from the perspective of space. This simple mental exercise, practiced by Marcus Aurelius and validated by modern psychology, instantly provides clarity and proportion when you're overwhelmed by life's immediate challenges. The view from above technique transforms anxiety into wisdom by revealing the cosmic insignificance of most daily stresses. Marcus Aurelius regularly practiced this visualization, imagining himself looking down at the Roman Empire from an infinite height. From that perspective, the political intrigues, military campaigns, and social dramas that consumed his daily attention appeared as tiny, temporary fluctuations in a vast universe. This didn't make him careless about his responsibilities, but helped him approach them with appropriate seriousness rather than desperate attachment. The technique involves systematic perspective shifts that reveal different levels of reality simultaneously. Start with your immediate physical location. See yourself sitting where you are right now. Gradually zoom out to see your building, your neighborhood, your city, your country, your continent, your planet, your solar system, your galaxy. From each level, notice how your current concerns appear smaller and more manageable. A friend facing a devastating divorce used this practice to maintain sanity during court proceedings. When anxiety about custody arrangements and financial settlements became overwhelming, she would mentally zoom out to see her situation from space. This did not minimize her legitimate concerns, but provided emotional regulation that allowed her to make better decisions and maintain perspective about what truly mattered: her children's well-being rather than winning against her ex-husband. The view from above also reveals the temporary nature of all current circumstances. Problems that seem permanent and overwhelming are actually brief episodes in the vast timeline of existence. This isn't about dismissing real challenges, but about recognizing that your capacity to handle difficulties is far greater than your anxious mind believes. The practice extends beyond personal problems to social and cultural issues. When political events, social conflicts, or cultural changes create stress, the cosmic perspective reminds you that human civilizations are temporary experiments in an ancient universe. This doesn't breed cynicism, but creates equanimity, the ability to engage meaningfully with current issues without being psychologically destabilized by them. Research on psychological distance confirms the effectiveness of perspective-taking exercises. People who regularly practice mental distancing show improved emotional regulation, better problem-solving abilities, and reduced anxiety and depression. The technique activates the prefrontal cortex responsible for executive function while calming the amygdala that processes threat responses. The view from above also reveals your interconnectedness with all existence. From space, national borders disappear, revealing one planet with a shared atmosphere and interconnected ecosystems. Personal problems become part of the universal human experience rather than unique personal failings or cosmic injustices. Implement the cosmic perspective exercise. When feeling overwhelmed, spend 5 minutes mentally zooming out from your current location to universal scale. At each level, notice how your problems appear different in size and significance. Practice temporal distancing. Imagine how your current concerns will matter in 1 year, 10 years, and 100 years. This doesn't minimize legitimate issues, but provides appropriate context for your emotional responses. Use the death of the universe perspective for ultimate problems, remembering that the sun will eventually die and the universe will reach heat. Death makes all current concerns appropriately small, while simultaneously making each moment precious. The goal isn't detachment, but right-sized engagement with life's challenges. The therapy connection. Why modern psychology validates ancient Stoicism. Here's something that might surprise you. Cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the most effective modern treatments for anxiety and depression, is essentially repackaged Stoicism. CBT's core principle that our thoughts about events, not the events themselves, determine our emotional responses, is identical to Epictetus's teaching that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The therapeutic technique of examining and challenging automatic thoughts mirrors the Stoic practice of examining impressions. When CBT therapists help clients identify cognitive distortions like catastrophizing or all-or-nothing thinking, they're teaching the same mental disciplines that Marcus Aurelius practiced in his personal journals 2,000 years ago. This isn't coincidental. The founders of cognitive therapy, including Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis, explicitly drew from Stoic philosophy when developing their approaches. Ellis frequently quoted Epictetus and recommended Stoic texts to his patients. The effectiveness of CBT in treating various mental health conditions essentially proves that Stoic techniques work for real psychological problems, not just philosophical contemplation. The convergence of ancient wisdom and modern science should give you confidence that these practices are not just interesting ideas, but practical tools for mental health and personal effectiveness. The Silicon Valley secret. How tech leaders use Stoic principles. While they rarely discuss it publicly, many of Silicon Valley's most successful leaders privately study and apply Stoic principles to handle the extreme pressures of startup culture and technological innovation. The reason is simple. Stoicism provides practical tools for maintaining psychological stability in highly uncertain, rapidly changing environments where most people burn out. The Stoic emphasis on controlling what you can control while accepting what you cannot resonates powerfully with entrepreneurs facing market volatility, funding challenges, and technological disruption. The practice of negative visualization helps leaders prepare for potential failures without becoming paralyzed by fear of them. The discipline of focusing on virtue over outcomes helps maintain integrity during ethical dilemmas common in competitive business environments. Several prominent tech executives have mentioned Stoic influences in interviews and writings, though they often don't explicitly label them as such. The practices show up as emotional regulation techniques, decision-making frameworks, and stress management strategies rather than ancient philosophy. This shouldn't be surprising. Stoicism was originally developed by people dealing with real-world responsibilities and pressures, not academic philosophers in ivory towers. The same principles that helped Marcus Aurelius manage an empire are perfectly applicable to managing modern organizations, teams, and personal careers in rapidly changing environments. These 13 Stoic lessons are not just ancient philosophy, they are practical tools for navigating the complexities of modern life with wisdom, resilience, and authentic purpose. From keeping your struggles private to using death as a teacher, from controlling your emotional responses to finding opportunity in every obstacle, these principles have guided some of history's most effective leaders through their greatest challenges. The beauty of Stoicism lies in its practicality. You don't need to believe in specific metaphysical concepts or join any organization. You simply need to recognize that your thoughts, choices, and responses to life's circumstances remain within your control, regardless of what happens around you. Master these internal domains, and you become unshakable in the face of any external challenge. Start with just one principle that resonated most strongly with you today. Practice it consistently for 30 days, and you'll begin to understand why Stoic philosophy has survived and thrived for over 2 millennia. If you found these insights valuable, make sure to check out our deep dive into Marcus Aurelius' most powerful personal practices for daily resilience. The link is in the description below.